All right, everybody, it's Dr. J, and I'm back with a quick summary of how we're going to name these compounds. All right, follow me on this flow chart. If you ever need any examples, make sure you click those other videos. Now, basically what you're doing with every single compound, you start out with this question: is there a metal or not? Okay, depending on if there's a metal, this is what we're going to do. So if it is a metal, all right, you then have to decide if it's a type 1 or type 2. Basically meaning, is the metal a transition metal? If the metal is a transition metal, then you're going to do this, okay? You're going to count the different elements, okay? In this case, if you have two elements, okay, this is an ionic binary. So basically, right, you need to determine the charge of your metal and then make sure you include the Roman numeral, okay, after the metal. Okay, the Roman numeral is always after the metal. Okay, and then, right, you name the non-metal, which is going to be second. You're going to change that ending to IDE. Okay, so this is what we're going to do every single time. If it's three or more elements, all right, this is a little bit different, but basically you're still the same flow, right? You got to determine the transition metal, give me the Roman numeral right after that metal. Okay, then name the polyatomic ion, because most likely it's a polyatomic ion in here. And then you're not going to change the ending to IDE. What if, right, it's not a transition metal? This is what we're going to do. Count your elements up. If it's 2, we know it's an ionic binary. Okay, so you're going to name the metal first, change the ending to IDE. That's it. If it's 3 or more, you name the metal first, then you name the polyatomic ion second, all right? And then, okay, then you do not change the ending to IDE. We're going to get an example of these in a bit, okay? Now, let's talk about on this side. Let's say for another example, right? Is there a metal in a compound? You always start with that question, is there a metal? Because that's going to determine if you have ionic compounds or if you have molecular compounds. If there is a metal in a compound, ionic. But if there's not a metal, this is what we're going to do here. Okay, so if it's not a metal, then you got to ask yourself, okay, is the first element a hydrogen? This is very key because if it is a hydrogen, then you have an acid, okay? Basically, all acids are going to have a hydrogen. So this is what you're going to have to do here. Like as we mentioned before, if it's hydrogen, right, you got hydro, whatever that element is, the root of it, then you change it to ic, acid, depending if it's ATE or ITE, right? And as I see, I gave you the examples here, okay? Now, what if there's not a hydrogen there? If that's not the first element, okay? If it's not the first element, then this is what you're going to do. Count the elements, of course. And then depending, right, if you only have one element, then it's a diatomic molecule. Diatomic molecules, here are your diatomic molecules. Go ahead and write those down, right? Name, same as the periodic table name. So it will be the same. So oxygen, right? If it's O2, it's just oxygen. All right? If it's bromine, it's just bromine, etc. Okay? Now, if it's 2 elements, this is what you're going to do, right? So now you got a covalent bond taking place. You have a molecular compound. What do we do with molecular compounds? Right? You name the first element, right? And then, depending, you might have to use prefixes, okay? Second element, you're going to use a prefix. You always use a prefix, okay? Always use a prefix with the second element. First element, you don't really have to use mono. That, like I mentioned before, is redundant. No need to use mono for the first one. And then, of course, you're changing the ending to IDE. This is a flow chart, right? This is how we're naming compounds. Make sure you get this in your mind. Start off with always, is there a metal in a compound? If there is or if there isn't, that will depend on where you go in your flow chart.